The sky above Geneva was completely silent, a silence more profound than any thunderstorm or power outage. For 3 full days, the vast white ship had hung there, directly above the old city center. It did not hover so much as simply exist. The Krillian flagship, the Ascension, was enormous, sleek, and utterly without any sharp edges. It looked like a mile-long pearl designed by a mathematical god. On Earth, people had stopped screaming and had moved on to quiet, endless waiting. Inside the temporary human contact facility, which was actually a repurposed United Nations security bunker, the air conditioning hummed loudly, trying to fight off the tension. Diplomat Alex Vance adjusted his simple gray tie. He was a man trained to navigate complicated human emotions and historical grudges, but he felt clumsy in the presence of the Krillian delegation. They were hyperlogical, serene, and seemed to float when they moved. Beside him, Chloe Green, the lead computational engineer, was checking the translation feeds one last time. Chloe specialized in systems that failed spectacularly, or almost failed, which meant she understood the messy nature of human technology better than anyone. She wore simple clothes, practical and comfortable, and her expression was a mix of intense curiosity and deep worry. "It still feels wrong, Alex," Chloe murmured, her voice tight. "They sent a request for first contact in perfect math, not language. It's like they see us as a variable, not a species." Alex nodded slowly. "That's their whole approach. They call themselves the hegemony. They view us as primitive and volatile. They aren't invaders, Chloe. They are, and I quote the translation, concerned guardians. They are here to manage us." The door to the meeting room hissed open, and the Krillian ambassador, Zulos, entered. Zulos was tall, perhaps 7 feet, with skin that shimmered faintly like polished obsidian. Its form was graceful, but its large, dark eyes held no warmth, only clinical observation. Zulos stood still for a moment, observing the 2 humans with an air of complete superiority. The ambassador's voice, when it spoke, was a smooth, low baritone that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate inside the mind. "We appreciate your prompt attendance, human representatives Vance and Green. Our initial data review is complete." Alex stepped forward, adopting his most professional posture. "Ambassador Zulos, we are prepared to discuss the terms of this first encounter. We want to understand your intentions toward our planet and our civilization." Zulos made a sound that the translator rendered simply as a click of acknowledgement. "Intentions are derived from need. Our need is stability. Your planet, while biologically rich, is fundamentally unstable. Your species is fragmented by countless historical conflicts, driven by what you call emotion and sentiment. These are not assets, but critical liabilities." Chloe felt a sudden flare of anger, but kept her expression neutral. Alex, the diplomat, smoothly intercepted. "Our emotions are what drive our art, our innovation, and our will to survive, Ambassador. Survival is inefficient when guided by impulse," Zulos countered, tilting its head slightly, an action devoid of curiosity. "We observed your recorded history. The vast majority of your societal struggles, poverty, war, self-destruction, are direct outcomes of illogical, emotional decisions. You spend resources defending borders that are arbitrary. You cling to beliefs that contradict empirical evidence. You are a species perpetually operating at 70% efficiency, always on the brink of self-inflicted catastrophe." The dismissal was total, absolute, and delivered with the serene confidence of a doctor diagnosing a sickness. Zulos continued, moving closer to a display table that held a small, perfect crystalline structure. We did not come to conquer, we came to manage. The Krillian hegemony exists to ensure cosmic stability. Your current state of chaotic self-governance threatens that stability, however, minimally. Therefore, we are here to provide structure, protocols, and oversight, to protect you, Mr. Vance, from your own chaotic nature. Chloe finally spoke, her tone measured but firm. With all respect, Ambassador, what you call chaos, we call resilience. We adapt. We learn from those messy failures. Your data models can't capture the sudden leap of inspiration that happens when all logical options are gone. Zulos paused, focusing its gaze on Chloe, the engineer. Inspiration is merely a statistically rare, non-optimal pathway to a measurable outcome. We prefer optimization. Our centuries of success are built on avoiding the 70% failure rate your inspiration often requires. Alex felt the weight of the moment. The Krillian were not evil. They were worse. They were perfectly logical, perfectly clean, and fundamentally dismissive of the human experience. He looked at Chloe and saw the fight in her eyes. So, the hegemony is here to guide us into stability, Alex stated, his voice calm, accepting the reality for now. What is the first step in this management? Zulos turned to face them fully, its shimmering surface reflecting the bunker's sterile lights. The first step is compliance. Your independent space programs will be merged into a Krillian-managed fleet. Your planetary defense systems will be placed under our safety control. We will install the necessary infrastructure to manage your resource distribution and minimize civil conflict. The ambassador's final assurance hung heavy in the room, devoid of threat, but full of finality. The humans, men and women, children, elderly, they would worship no longer at the temple. They would bring their gifts to the foot of the Krillian ship, and Genovese would be perfectly secure.
Weeks passed under the silent watch of the Ascension. The Krillian hegemony began what they called the data ingestion phase. It was not a search for threats, but a search for flaws. They did not use spies or soldiers. They used massive, perfect sensors that gathered every piece of data humanity had ever created. Every book, every internet search, every financial record, every law, and every messy love letter was fed into the hegemony's central processing unit. Alex Vance and Chloe Green continued their daily meetings with Ambassador Xylos, but the talks were less about diplomacy and more about the Krillian delivering their findings. Xylos never showed anger or surprise, only mild, patronizing disappointment. In one sterile white room, Xylos displayed a holographic timeline of human history. The screen glowed a sickly green, marking all the points of major conflict. "We have modeled your existence, human Vance," Xylos stated flatly. "In 3,000 years of recorded history, your species has spent 72% of its collective effort either preparing for, executing, or recovering from conflict with itself. This is illogical. Your stated goals, peace, prosperity, stability, are constantly undermined by your core operating parameters, sentiment, tribalism, and fear of the other." Chloe looked at the timeline, which showed World War II as a tiny, irrational spike of red energy. She wanted to argue, to point out the Renaissance or the Enlightenment, but she knew the Krillian would only see those periods as inefficient pauses in the conflict cycle. "We are driven by more than just conflict," Chloe insisted. "Look at the leaps in technology, the rapid changes in just the last 100 years. That comes from curiosity." Xylos shifted its tall body. "Curiosity guided by panic. You only solved the problem of airborne pollution when the air became unbreathable.
You only truly advance your medical science when facing mass plagues. Your innovation is reactive, not predictive. It is based on desperate necessity, not optimized planning. The ambassador then pulled up a complex diagram showing the human economy. It was a tangled mess of overlapping lines, boom and bust cycles, and vast sudden transfers of wealth that served no logical purpose. The concept of hope is the most confounding element. You proceed with projects, scientific, political, and personal, that have mathematically impossible odds of success. You rely on what you term miracles to pull you through. This is the definition of inefficient system design. When logical options are exhausted, your species does not accept the inevitable outcome. It attempts a statistically non-viable improvisation. Alex felt a cold wave of realization wash over him. The Krillians saw their resilience, their ability to bounce back from the edge, not as a strength, but as a symptom of chronic poor planning. They thought humanity was simply too stubborn and too optimistic to die quietly. "We are durable, Ambassador," Alex said, trying to find a word Xylos might respect. "Durability born of recklessness," Xylos corrected instantly. "The hegemony has compiled its final assessment. Humanity is designated as a volatile, low-tier resource pool. Your intellectual capacity is high, but your emotional instability renders you unreliable for advanced strategic planning within the hegemony." The verdict was harsh. Humanity was useful, perhaps, but only when tightly managed. They were like a powerful engine with a faulty, overly sensitive emotional governor. "We will not be granting you independent galactic membership. You will be integrated under Level 3 oversight. This means we will handle all infrastructure maintenance, resource distribution, and long-range defense. Your struggle for self-governance is effectively concluded. It is for your own safety." Later that evening, in a guarded but private room, Alex and Chloe sat in silence, drinking stale coffee. "Level 3 oversight," Chloe muttered, running a hand through her short hair. "We're basically a protected wildlife reserve." "A volatile wildlife reserve," Alex corrected him. "He insulted us with math, Chloe. He used our own history to prove we're stupid to run ourselves. The worst part is that he wasn't wrong about the 72% conflict rate." Chloe leaned forward, her eyes still holding that fire Xylos had dismissed as mere sentiment. "But that's where he failed. Xylos and the hegemony only look at the averages and the endpoints. They only see the loss. They don't see the how." "The how?" asked Alex. "Yes. How do you go from a world war to a global space station in 20 years? How do you cure a disease that was supposed to wipe out half the planet? It's that moment when the logic fails, when the spreadsheets say give up, but one person throws out the rule book and tries the one thing that should never work. That's the part they can't measure, and that's the only reason we're still here, messy and inefficient as we are." Alex looked out the window at the impossible silent ship hanging over their world. He knew Xylos believed humanity's greatest weakness was their hope. He just had no idea yet how that very weakness would become the galaxy's only solution.
The management phase began quietly, just as Xylos had promised. For several weeks, life on Earth changed in small, measurable ways. Resource allocation became fairer and more efficient. Global systems ran at what the Krillian called optimized capacity. The human military was peacefully folded into a low-level orbital defense fleet run by Krillian automation. Alex and Chloe, though technically sidelined, were kept on the Ascension as liaisons, observing the flawless new order. Everything was running smoothly, which only made the silence more frustrating for Chloe. The perfect system felt cold and suffocating. Then, the flawless system broke. The problem did not come from a messy human war or a reckless scientific mistake. It came from deep space, from a distant region known as the Cygnus Link, the very backbone of the Krillian hegemony's communication and navigation grid. It began with an impossible, complex wave of thermodynamic instability, a catastrophic chain reaction that was both highly rare and rapidly expanding. Inside the Ascension's central command center, the atmosphere changed instantly. It did not shift to human panic, but to a controlled, deep dread. The shimmering surfaces of the consoles, usually cool blue, were suddenly flashing urgent magenta. The tall, serene Krillian officers moved with a new jarring speed, their movements precise but clearly strained. Ambassador Xylos appeared, his dark eyes fixed on the main holographic projection. The projection did not show Earth, but a huge branching network of light that represented the Krillian infrastructure. A large pulsing scar of black heat was spreading across the critical juncture of the Cygnus Link. Alex and Chloe were called to the bridge immediately. Alex felt a surge of fear. Was this an invasion? Was this the galactic war they had been worried about? "Ambassador Xylos, what is happening?" Alex asked, his voice echoing in the huge room. Xylos looked at him, and for the first time, Alex saw something other than clinical detachment in the alien's gaze. It was pure, absolute failure. "A thermodynamic cascade," Xylos explained, his voice still low but lacking its usual resonance. "A system failure caused by an unforeseen quantum interaction. It is destroying the primary data conduit of the hegemony. If the cascade reaches the central processor, a guaranteed outcome in 43 Earth hours, all major Krillian navigational systems in this sector will crash. It is a critical, destabilizing event for the entire local galactic community." Chloe, the engineer, immediately moved towards the nearest analysis screen. She started reading the strange energy signatures and complex thermal readouts. "There must be a way to isolate it, cut the power, reroute the flow, put up a thermal barrier." Xylos nodded slowly. "We have run the analysis 10,000 times in the last hour. There is only one logical solution: a massive, immediate power redirection. It requires overloading a redundant sector, the Lyra node, with 78% of the cascade energy flow." "Then do it," Alex urged. "Overload the redundant node, destroy it, and save the rest." Xylos remained motionless, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "That is the critical failure. The Lyra node is designated as a necessary secondary asset. The required power redirection has a 70% probability of resulting in the total, immediate annihilation of the Lyra node and its substations." "So what?" Chloe asked, confused. 70% failure in one node is better than 100% failure of the entire link." "No," Xylos stated, the word seeming to pain it. "The Krillian hegemony operates on the fundamental principle of maximized efficiency and minimum acceptable loss. Our core protocols, developed over millennia to eliminate chaotic failure, forbid any action that introduces a known, highly probable failure of a defined asset. We cannot ethically authorize an action with a 70% risk of immediate, massive destruction, even if inaction leads to certain, slower destruction." The vast Krillium command center, filled with the greatest minds of the hegemony, was completely frozen. They were watching the thermodynamic cascade advance, counting down the 43 hours until their system crashed because their perfect logic told them that taking the necessary risk was statistically unacceptable. Alex looked at Chloe. The Krillians saw their willingness to take a chance as a weakness, and now that very lack of courage was about to destroy them. The time remaining until total system collapse dropped to 30 hours. The massive holographic display on the Ascension Bridge continued to pulse with the spreading black heat of the thermodynamic cascade. Every Krillian mind on the ship was focused on finding a zero-risk, high-efficiency solution, which meant finding no solution at all.
They were waiting for a miracle that their own logic forbade them from creating. Alex Vance stood next to Chloe Green near the edge of the paralyzed command deck. The silent despair of the Krillian was heavier than any shout of panic would have been. "They're going to watch their entire communication grid burn," Alex whispered, his throat tight, "because the protocol says a 70% chance of failure is worse than a 100% certainty of total gradual collapse. It's insane." Chloe was no longer looking at the Krillian data. She was focused on an external maintenance port, a tiny standard entry point that ran the old, messy code for localized power flow adjustments, code that the Krillian had merely overlaid with their own perfect, efficient operating system. She remembered Xylos's comments from weeks ago. They only solved problems when facing desperate necessity. Well, this was it. He called it statistically non-viable improvisation. They can't see the how. They can only see the numbers. She quickly pulled out a piece of human technology, a small, tough-looking diagnostic module that she had insisted on keeping. It was bulky, designed to work around broken safety features, built for the messy reality of Earth systems, not the pristine logic of the hegemony. "The Lyra node doesn't need to be destroyed completely," Chloe explained quickly to Alex. "It needs a split-second, massive thermal shock to create a temporary structural breach that isolates the cascade. The Krillian system is too clean to allow that kind of dirty bypass, but their system still runs on the messy logic of energy transfer. If I can use this old gear to manually inject a corrupted override command directly into that maintenance port, I can trick the Lyra node into executing the power dump outside of the hegemony's main protocol." Alex stared at the complex array of wires and the small screen on her module. "Trick the Lyra node? That is completely against all protocol. If you fail, you don't just lose the node, you could cause the cascade to jump directly to the ascension." "The cascade is coming anyway, Alex," Chloe countered, looking him straight in the eyes. "We have 29 hours left. Their logic has failed. Now we need recklessness. We need human desperation." She glanced over at Ambassador Xylos, who was still locked in a frozen stance of ethical paralysis. Xylos's failure was one of inaction. Alex knew the diplomat's job was to respect Krillian authority, but his duty was to save Earth. If the Krillian communication grid failed, their control over Earth would be completely unstable, likely leading to their departure or an even more messy, less managed takeover. "Do it, Chloe," Alex authorized, the emotional decision cutting through the logical paralysis of the room. "Do the statistically non-viable thing. You are cleared." Chloe didn't wait. She moved to the maintenance port, attaching her module. The Krillian officers finally noticed the human activity, but they were too slow, too bound by process, to stop an unauthorized person doing something utterly illogical. The interface on Chloe's module was crude, displaying lines of basic human code that looked like nonsense compared to the flowing Krillian language. She had to manage 3 critical steps: bypass the power lock, inject the override instruction, and then immediately execute the emergency thermal dump, all within a 10-second window. A slip of a few milliseconds would mean failure. Xylos approached, his long body trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the violation of core logic. "Human Green, cease this action immediately. It is an unacceptable risk profile. You are introducing unnecessary chaos." Chloe's eyes never left the screen. "Chaos is what makes life possible, Ambassador. It's the moment the logic breaks that you find the new path." The air filled with the sharp smell of ozone as her module overloaded the small port. Sparks flew. The Krillian system screamed a silent digital protest. Chloe pressed the final button.
For a heart-stopping moment, the entire bridge went dark, plunging them into emergency red lighting. Then, on the main holographic display, the black spreading scar of the cascade hit the Lyra node. Instead of passing through, the energy slammed into the artificially created structural breach, momentarily held, and then erupted outward in a controlled, contained blast. The Lyra node was gone, a sudden, clean, violent loss. But the rest of the Cygnus link, the main system, stabilized instantly. The silence returned, but this time it was the silence of recovery, not dread. Chloe leaned back, her hands shaking, her face streaked with sweat. The impossible, messy thing had worked. The Krillian were saved by the recklessness they despised. Xylos stood over her, looking from the smoky, sparking maintenance port to the stable, holographic map. The ambassador had just witnessed a perfect logical failure, averted by an act of absolute illogical human nerve.
Ambassador Xylos stood motionless, staring at the smoking, messy piece of human hardware still attached to the Krillian maintenance port. The scent of burned insulation filled the pristine command center of the Ascension. All around them, the massive holographic displays were slowly resolving from urgent magenta back to their calm, cool blue. The thermodynamic cascade was isolated. The Cygnus link was stable. Chloe Green, exhausted but triumphant, carefully disconnected her module, winding the colored wires back into a neat coil. She looked up at the towering alien. "The Lyra node is a loss," Xylos stated, its voice low and analytical, yet now carrying a strange note of confusion. 70% probability of annihilation was reached and executed. An unacceptable loss was incurred. Alex Vance stepped between the engineer and the ambassador. "Yes, Ambassador, but the cost was calculated and the risk was accepted. The 70% loss saved the 100% collapse." Xylos did not answer immediately. It turned away from the human pair and walked toward the main console, its movements less fluid than usual. It began running a deep, rapid diagnostic on the moment of human intervention. The data streams confirmed the truth. The logic of the Krillian system had been correct that the action was too risky. Yet inaction would have guaranteed a disaster 100 times worse. Xylos realized its perfect logic was fatally flawed. The protocol was designed to survive in a predictable universe where all threats were measurable and manageable. But the universe was not always predictable. Sometimes, when a truly random, catastrophic event occurred, the only way to survive was to violate the rules of survival. "The statistically non-viable improvisation succeeded," Xylos murmured, the words echoing Chloe's earlier statement. "Our core directive, minimum acceptable loss, prevented us from taking the action necessary for maximum survival. Our stability killed us." It turned back to face Alex and Chloe. The alien's large, dark eyes seemed to be truly seeing them for the first time, not as primitive variables, but as complex, necessary components. "We designated your human characteristics, the capacity for hope, the willingness to gamble everything, the reliance on reckless, immediate action as liabilities," Xylos admitted, a profound statement from a species that rarely revised its judgments. "We were incorrect. Those traits are not liabilities. They are the only viable defense against events that are illogical and unpredictable." The ambassador walked over to where Alex stood, stopping just a few feet away. "The Krillian hegemony exists on a spectrum of logic. But when logic dictates a slow, certain death, a system must possess the ability to choose immediate, possible destruction for the chance of total survival. This ability to break the rules, to invent solutions when all data points to surrender, is a strength we do not possess." Xylos paused, gathering his thoughts. It was rewriting centuries of Krillian doctrine in real time.
We were prepared to manage you, human Vance. We saw you as the child needing protection from its own dangerous impulses. But we were the ones who froze in the face of true danger, paralyzed by our own efficient design. And you, human Green, the one who relies on messy code and improvisation, you provided the necessary solution. The ambassador sent a final, long-range transmission back to the Hegemony's Central Council. Alex and Chloe did not need the translator to know the gravity of the message. Xylos returned to them, the tension finally gone from its form. I have delivered a new assessment of your species. I have reversed the Level 3 oversight designation. I have requested immediate Level 1 integration. Alex raised an eyebrow, surprised. Level 1? That means full equal partnership. Yes, Xylos confirmed, but with a unique role. We need your volatility. We need your capacity for what you call miracles. When logic fails, we now understand that we must turn to human chaos. Your ability to create non-optimal, messy, last-second solutions is now considered the most essential strategic asset in the Hegemony's defense matrix. The ambassador offered a gesture that, if translated into human terms, was a profound bow of respect. We came to protect you from your strength, human Vance. We stayed because we realized we needed that strength to protect ourselves from the universe. Looking out the huge panoramic window, Alex and Chloe could see the Ascension already changing its orientation. No longer a watchful guard, but a partner preparing for a joint mission. Below them, Earth continued its busy, messy, imperfect existence, safe and, for the first time in a long time, truly free. They had not won by fighting the aliens, but by proving that their most human qualities, their optimism, their recklessness, their undying hope, were the one thing the perfect logical universe desperately needed.